I'd like to say hello, bonjour, and welcome to the George Duboeuf virtual press trip. For over 30 years, the FACC has been hosting the annual Beaujolais Nouveau celebration featuring the young wine produced by George Duboeuf. We thank you all for flying with us to Beaujolais, France today. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you aboard the FACC flight number 2020. Let me introduce you to our flight crew. Our captain on today's flight is Romain Teyteau, export director for les vins Georges Duboeuf. My name is Odile Edouard Young. I am your lead flight attendant and the executive director of the French American Chamber of Commerce in Minnesota. Joining me is Elizabeth Johnson Hollard, FACCMN Vice President and co-host on today's flight. Elizabeth will be going up and down the virtual aisle, monitoring the Q&A attendant flight. Just as a reminder, the FACCMN is an independent, non-profit, non-governmental, and member-driven organization. We are part of a network of 25 French-American chambers in North America, dedicated to fostering transatlantic business relationships between France and the United States. The relationship with Georges Duboeuf is one of them. We are proud members of CCI France International with a unique network of 126 chambers in 95 countries. As a reminder, this event is being recorded. The expected duration of this flight is 45 minutes. We are not expecting any turbulence today. Ready to just wanting to make sure that everybody's seatbelt is buckled, ready for takeoff. Enjoy your flight. With no further delay, I am now giving the virtual commands to our captain, Romain Teyteau.
Okay, thank you, Odile. What an introduction. And I'm sorry, but the captain tonight might be drinking a little Beaujolais while flying to Beaujolais. Thank you for the introduction. Georges Duboeuf, we've been very proud partners of the FACC for over 40 years, because in our mind you are part of France, le rayonnement de la France, we would say in French. We're very happy to have francophones, francophiles all over the US promoting France, businesses, culture, and wine as well. So we've always done that. We've always donated wine, trying to support as much as we can. Every year, usually I fly to one of the FACC to participate in the event. And this year, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it, but I'm so happy that the FACC of Minnesota was able to put this together. And we are going to try to make it almost as good as if we were with you in person. So today, because it's what 12 in the it's noon in Minnesota, it's 7 p.m. in France, and we're ready for a tour of Beaujolais. So what I'm going to do today is to tell you a little bit about the history of Georges Duboeuf, and then we'll learn more about Beaujolais. This is actually some shots we took in the vineyard earlier this year, and you see all the people you see are people working we work with for every day. So George Duboeuf, you see a lot of time you okay, that's baby George. You see, I've been working. So I'm Romain Teyteau, export director of George Duboeuf. I've been working with the Duboeuf family for over 10 years now, and you see a lot of time you see brands or names that are brands, and there you don't know if there is an actual person behind the name. At George Duboeuf, George passed in at the beginning of the year. We are still family owned and operated. It's still 100% independent family winery, and we work with about 400 different mom and pop wineries in the region of Beaujolais. A lot of big names in wine nowadays are owned by corporation, or they're owned by hedge funds, or or anything else, or people that have nothing to do with wine. Here we still are independent and family owned, and that's something we're very proud of. Even in the company, you see employees are there, generation to generation. It's the what makes our strength is really uh, that honesty and that sense of family. So here you see that little boy is Georges Duboeuf. He was born in 1933 in the town of Chantrey. So Chantrey is in the southern part of Burgundy, near Mâcon. That's where we produce a wine that's very famous called Pouilly-Fuissé. So Pouilly-Fuissé, for those of you who know, is a white wine. It's made of Chardonnay, but we're more famous for Beaujolais. That's because when George was 20 something, he moved from Pouilly-Fuissé to Beaujolais. But what really made George stand apart from the rest of the people in the region is the way he was thinking. He was thinking differently than his friends and neighbors. He really, from a very young age, had the way to think that was special, and he was a special kid. For example, at the time in his family vineyard in Pouilly-Fuissé, people were using rusted basket, with la rouille, rust on the basket. And George said, okay, that's not good for the wine. It cannot be good. Let's use straw basket instead. And he had all these little ideas always to make better quality wine. From when he was a teenager, he he thought of a wine museum. He drew maps on a book, and on the wall of his room of his bedroom at his parents' place. And when he was 60 years old, he made the museum he dreamt of as a kid. So he had all these ideas always in his mind. And one of the thing that really made him stand out was that he was going direct to sell his wine. So instead of selling to a middleman, he would sell directly to restaurants. And to do so, he was just using his bike and riding his bike to nearby restaurants in the region of Lyon, where you have a lot of three Michelin star restaurants. And he was just putting wine samples in the saddle of his bike and going to restaurants. And George restarted selling direct to restaurants. And the second idea he had was, next slide, Odile, please. The second idea he had was to buy an old truck, a truck we use. Actually, that truck you see here was used by country doctors to go to remote places in Mâconnais and Beaujolais to do X-rays. And he bought that old truck and converted it into a moving bottling line. So what you see here on that picture is a moving bottling line. So at an estate. So remember we are in the 50s, 1950s, early 1960s in France. That's right after World War II, and France is ruined, and a lot of these small domains are not equipped. They don't have electricity. For a lot of them, they don't have electricity. They're not equipped to bottle wine. So what he did, say, okay, you're making a wine that from vineyard that has been in your family for hundreds of years sometime, and basically the fruit of your work is going to go to what we call a négociant to be blended. Basically, a négociant is a merchant who would come with a big tank on his truck. He will take all the wine from your vat, from your tank, and go to the next domain and do the same thing all over again until his tank is full. And what happens when you do that is that you lose the sense of place, because basically your wine is mixed, is blended with other producer. You lose also your personality. You lose your name, because your name is not on the bottle, on the label of the bottle, and also you lose money. So he said, okay, that's not a good system when you're a producer, and I want to do things differently. So he bought this old truck I was telling you about, and that you can see here in picture, and he made it a moving bottling line. So this way he was going to the places, to the domains, and bottling at the estate, and putting on the label the name of the family that had made the wine. So this way he really shortcut the way things were made before, and he was able to represent very small wineries directly to the restaurant he was friend with. So we can see the next slide. And there you see Georges Duboeuf standing on the right, seated on the right, is Georges Duboeuf. I think it's in 1970. And across the table is Jean-Ernest Descombes, is a famous producer from Morgon. And if you look at all the chefs, all these chefs here are Michelin star restaurant. I think like if you count them, we must have like 40 Michelin star altogether. To the left, you see Paul Bocuse. Paul Bocuse was named the chef of the century, and was really the one who revolutionized the French cuisine in the 1960s and 70s. And he was also Georges Duboeuf's best friend. So until, I remember just a few years ago when Georges and Paul were with us, I remember Paul making pranks of Georges, on Georges. For example, when Georges Duboeuf turned 80 years old, Paul Bocuse sent him a big box, a big gift with a big gift with a big ribbon on top. And inside that big box, there was a smaller box and a smaller box and a smaller box, just like Russian dolls. And the last box was a pair of charentaises of how do you call that? Odile. I'm not sure the word in English, but it's basically small shoes you keep at home when you're retired sometimes. So it was just a joke of Paul Bocuse saying, okay, you're turning 80 now, you're gonna have to slow down. But they kept, both George and Paul kept working until their last days. So Beaujolais, and because of Georges Duboeuf, became famous. So Georges was not only making good wines, but also he was promoting the wines differently. He was making Beaujolais Nouveau parties. He was bringing the producer, some of whom had never left the vineyard. He was taking them on a plane and going to New York, to Tokyo, to Rio de Janeiro, also going to London. And that's something that people were not doing at the time, because he thought that we need to go meet people who love the wine. And if you see the next slide, that's the cover of the Wine Spectator, one of the most famous reviews about wine. And you see that's when Georges Duboeuf was nicknamed the King of Beaujolais, and he always hated to be called the king, because he didn't consider himself as a king, but he was a very humble person. And whenever I look at this cover, I look at the guy on the right hand side who is half naked, or at least hopefully is half naked. I don't know because of the basket, but he made it to the cover of the Wine Spectator as well. I don't even know if he knows he did the cover of the Wine Spec. So a few years after, on the next slide, the the baton was passed to the next generation with our current CEO, Frank Duboeuf, second generation, just like his father. Sometimes I see him at the winery every day, but sometimes he reminds me so much of his dad. That's striking how he's very similar to his dad. Um, so now we have a third generation with the grandson and granddaughters at the Duboeuf winery, and we're still family owned and operated. So that's a lot of thing I said about Georges Duboeuf, but let's look at the region of Beaujolais, and we're going to see that in the next few slides. But first, because I don't know how many of you have a bottle of Beaujolais next to you. Maybe it's time to start drinking. Nobody will see you. I don't see you on camera. Maybe have a little taste. I had a little taste before because I'm going to be presenting the region of Beaujolais. So that's the Beaujolais Nouveau. Feel free to enjoy a little bit of Beaujolais Nouveau while I'm giving you a tour of the region. So if you're familiar, if you're from France, because I know we have many people that are actually from France, and some who are Francophiles who have lived in France, have a strong bond with France. It's going to be easier for you to get situated. But basically, in the north, you have Paris. And if you would go, let's say, for when you're allowed to travel again, you want to do a 2 week trip, or maybe 1 week or 10 days trip to France. Let's say you land in Paris, go to Champagne. It's always good to start with Champagne, and then you're going to head south to Burgundy. And Burgundy, we have Pinot Noir for the reds and Chardonnay for the whites. And if you go to the southern part of Burgundy, that's where you have Beaujolais, the region of Beaujolais. So you can say that Beaujolais is a part of Burgundy, but because we have a different grape variety called Gamay, and we have a different climate, it's a little bit warmer than in Burgundy. You can consider basically it's the backyard of Burgundy, or the neighbor, the surrounding of Burgundy. So after Beaujolais, you're gonna be in Lyon. So basically, if you drive from Lyon, within 15 minutes after you leave the city of Lyon, you're gonna see the first vineyards of Beaujolais, and that's where we are. So if you continue your trip, you could go to Provence, but if you like Beaujolais, you're gonna stay in Beaujolais the whole time. So here, let's have a look at Beaujolais. This maps are always important in the world of wine, especially because we believe in something called terroir in France. For example, you look at the labels in France, it will say where it comes from. If you look at labels in the US, it will say most of the time the brand and the variety, the grape varietal. So you will say it's a Pinot Noir, it's a Chardonnay, it's a Cabernet. You will not say it's coming from this region or that region most of the time, generally speaking. In France, many French people know Beaujolais, but they don't know what grape we use. The grape variety we use is red very, very. So Beaujolais, if you look at the map, it's actually quite, it's 4 miles north to south and 10 miles wide. At Beaujolais, we are at the last slopes of the Massif Central, so the central mountain range at the center of France. So very old mountains. Are very young mountains. So we're on old mountains, volcanic, and with a lot of granite in the soil. So look at the map of Beaujolais. We have what we call appellation. Basically, what is an appellation is it's where it's coming from. So when you hear the word Beaujolais Nouveau, Beaujolais is where it's coming from, and Nouveau is how it's made. And the regions of Beaujolais is divided into if you can go back to the map, is divided into 12 appellations, but basically 3 tiers. In the south, where you see yellow on the map, that's the southern part of Beaujolais. That's where you have more sun and you have a lot of limestone. That's where Beaujolais Nouveau comes from. And that makes very simple, very fruity, very young and fresh wine. It's simple Beaujolais. If you're going up the pyramid, you're going to see that pink color. That's Beaujolais Village. It's the second wine we're going to taste. And you see here, you're getting closer to another region that's in picture here in purple. That's called the Cru of Beaujolais. So basically, it's a place where the soil is special, mainly because it has granite and it's on hills. And that will make the wine more complex, more structured, more long-lived. So basically, the same grape variety we're going to use is going to express very different style of wine because of where it's planted, of where it comes from. So tonight, the three wines you're going to taste are going to be these 3 tiers and also different winemaking. Okay, so let's move on to the next. So now we see lots beautiful picture of Beaujolais here. I like this picture because it really shows you how small the parcels are. In Beaujolais, we hand harvest everything. We don't use machines. We hand harvest manually everything. The only other wine region in France where it's mandatory to use machines, hand harvesting is Champagne. Beaujolais, we're very traditional. We hand harvest. We don't use machine. We work in small parcels, and lots of these parcels. The way Beaujolais is like that is because most of the parcels have been inherited from generation to generation, and that makes like very small subdivisions. If you go to Beaujolais, it's a region that's so nice. You look at these smiles on the people's face. You know, here you see how they have um, elles doivent s'agenouiller because it's very small bushes. You see these bushes of gamay vines, they are very, very small. They are not high. No, you have to really bend over to pick the grapes and to harvest. So it's a lot of work. It's not very easy. But people do that, with a smile. And if you go to Beaujolais, you see how nice the people are. It's more a farmer's wine as opposed to like a banker's wine. People that make the wine are actually working all year long in the vineyard and very humble and very nice and super friendly. Here you see a group of harvesters, and that's really what you can see in Beaujolais. It's not like a chateau. Sometime in some region of France, or even if you've been to Napa, or sometime in Burgundy or in Bordeaux, it looks like they ask you for your credit card before you taste, or at least if they do a tasting and you don't buy at the end, they give you a bad look. In Beaujolais, people are just opening the doors of their cellar and really welcoming you to taste, and they do that genuinely. So it's something I love, and that made me fall in love with the region of Beaujolais. Do you guys want to see? Okay, that's a gamay grape. You see a whole cluster, and that's how it looks like. So depending on where it's coming from, you're gonna have small or big berries, or small or big grape bunch. Maybe now it's time to taste the wine. So I don't know. I don't see the chat, so I don't know if you guys wanted to ask me questions. Um, so the wines we're going to taste today, we're going to start with the youngest
Oui.
and go to the oldest wine. Typically, when you taste several wines, you want to start with the youngest or the most aromatic, the lighter bodied, and you're going to fuller bodied. So we're going to start with very light, very fresh, but you cannot think of a younger wine than Beaujolais Nouveau. And then we're going to see 2019 Beaujolais Villages that is going to be more structure, more complex. And then we'll see a Cru Beaujolais Morgon that has 4 years. 4 years, so nice aging and really it's perfect time to taste the wine. So you'll see that the same grape makes very different wines. And that's the magic of wine. For example, if you buy I don't know 6 bottles of the same wine and you drink one bottle every year, you will see how it evolves, how it changes, and and, and that's one thing I really appreciate. Okay,
Romain?
I'm going to pretend that everybody's tasting with me.
And I have a question.
Okay.
When is a good time to pose questions? There is one. There was one about, you mentioned a couple of different things, that the size of the grape, the Gamay grape, you said the size of the grape affects the flavor. So just that might be of interest to add while you're describing the wines that we're about to taste.
So that actually the thank you for the question. By the way, I don't see the question, so it's good that you relay the question. So the if you look at at a bunch of Gamay grape, the skin is black, the juice is white. When you press the cluster, the juice is white. So that's why, for example, with the Gamay, we can do a rosé. That's for the same reason with Pinot Noir, you can do a champagne, which has no color. It's because the juice is white and the color comes from the skin. When you have bigger bunch, you have more juice. The juice skin ratio is different. So you have more juice for less skin. If you have small grapes, it's more concentrated. So you have more skin with less juice. So typically you have more concentrated flavors and you have more tannins. The tannins are in the skin and are in the skin of the grape. So typically, that's why we say I don't like that because I'm not sadistic, but we say a lot of time that vine has to suffer to make good wine. So typically, if you grow a vine on where somewhere you would, for example, you could grow corn, very rich soil, lots of water, you're gonna have like big supermarket grapes, and that flavor is going to be diluted within the grape. Whereas if you grow somewhere that you couldn't grow anything but vine, these vines are going to have to struggle and to grow their vines, to grow their roots between the rocks, for example, between sand, and to go very, very deep to get water and nutrients. And they will be much smaller, producing what we call lower yield and more concentration of flavor. So typically, that's why like the size of the grape or the yield, to be more precise, matters. That was a short question and a long answer.
You're going to get follow-up from these. So if you want to stop some questions, we can. But the other question was regarding tannins. And you talk about the the thicker skins, the more tannin in the skin. And sometimes there's a positive and negative relationship with the word tannin. If that would be of something you could address, that might be interesting.
Tannins, you see, tannins can come either from the grapes or from the oak aging. So tannins come from the oak, can come from the oak or from the grape. All the wines we're tasting today, the tannins come from the grape. There is no oak aging. The tannins is what we call is astringent. So that's what you taste the wine. You're going to rub your tongue on your gum, on your cheek, and you're gonna feel something. Sometimes you can say the wine is chewy. You're going to have this feeling of astringents. The same thing you can find in tea. That's the tannins. Some people like it, some don't. If you're looking at Beaujolais Nouveau, it's no tannins. No tannins. Okay, because we didn't leave the grapes for a long time with the skin during the wine making. For wines that have waited a longer time, you're going to have more tannins. But tannins can be a bit harsh at the beginning. So if you have a cru Beaujolais that's too young, it's not going to be very pleasant. The tannins are going to be harsh. But if you wait, these tannins are going to soften to get more silky and will be very, very good. For lack of a better word, but it will really be supple and silky and makes the wine even better. Okay.
Romain, we
Yes.
we had a selection of a soft triple cream cheese and a harder one, a Comté one, to invite our guests and friends to enjoy the Beaujolais Nouveau. Do you have any recommendation as to the pairings?
You see, what's fun is to try. There is no better way than to try by yourself. So you have the bottle of wine in front of you. Try the cheeses, okay?
And I know
have
you
fun.
have saucisson with you.
Yes, I have saucisson, I have cheese, but typically the softer cheese with the youngest wine or the low the oh my gosh, I'm missing my words today. I apologize. The lesser body, no,
Oh, that makes
the fuller body the wine, the no the bigger the cheese. Basically, follow the same path.
interesting, Romain. That makes a lot of sense.
But honestly, try. There's no better way than to try by yourself.
And
Sometime you may find something unusual, and when you make a great pairing, it's just like magical because the goal of a wine pairing is to make 1 + 1 equal 2, equals 3, equals 3. So so the wine makes the cheese taste better, and the cheese makes the wine taste better. So it's magical.
brilliant,
And when you're able to do that, it's fantastic.
brilliant. Romain, may I ask maybe a very immature question, but would you pair the Beaujolais? We have some wine bars opening that are wine and chocolate bars or wine and dessert bars.
Mhm.
Would you pair a Beaujolais with any kind of chocolate or dessert? Or
Oh yes, you can. You can typically for chocolate, you would look more for an aged cru Beaujolais, like the Morgon we're going to taste.
like the Morgon?
For dessert, Beaujolais Nouveau, for example, we are talking about Paul Bocuse. At Paul Bocuse, you can have a Beaujolais sorbet. You can do anything uh, with black currants, small berries, anything with berries with Beaujolais Nouveau would be great, like a blueberry sorbet, something fresh like that would be perfect with Beaujolais Nouveau,
Um,
slightly chilled.
as a foodie, may I ask, would you incorporate the Beaujolais Nouveau then in your recipe? Or
Yes,
would you have the Beaujolais Nouveau accompany your berry dessert?
you can do both. You can do usually when I'm cooking with wine, I put as much in the recipe as in my glass. So, but yeah, you can cook. You can cook with Beaujolais Nouveau. You can do a sorbet. I was see. I went yesterday. It's a big thing in the arrival of Beaujolais Nouveau in France, and I was at my local boulangerie, and they did a Beaujolais bread.
Oh,
Mm.
Oh my God. Any cheese in it or just the Beaujolais bread?
Saucisson, Beaujolais with a little bit of saucisson
Oh
in
my
in the
gosh.
bread. You can cook. We have a very traditional recipe in Beaujolais. We do at that time of the year. We cook saucisson. We cook sausages inside wine.
Whoa, whoa,
So you
whoa.
get the food and the drink at the same time.
You know what this reminds me of, Romain? We have a Kugelhopf in Alsace that is um, uh, I don't know, like a salty one with lard, and walnuts. So lard is the lard, and it's not lard. It's a false cognate, but um, how do you say?
Like
Uh,
bacon.
a bacon and walnuts and so what you are describing makes me think of what could be a good Alsatian recipe.
So it's a wine region too. It's a wine region too. But try so what we think at Duboeuf, and something I learned from Georges Duboeuf himself, because I've been working alongside him for 10 years. Um, he say you're always learning. You're, when you're a wine legend like him, you would imagine like that he could like think highly of himself, but it was not the case. He was saying, I'm a beginner. Every year I'm a beginner. And that's the kind of attitude we have. uh, every vintage we start again, we learn again, we try things. So it's the same thing. If you want to experiment pairing with your local food, you can. So for example, one of my favorite pairings is a burger with a Beaujolais, with a chilled Beaujolais. It's delicious. You don't have to match um, Beaujolais with French food. For example, anything with spice would go well with Beaujolais, because Beaujolais has good acidity, which is very important for wine, for food. Good acidity, fruit, it's aromatic, and it's not killing the flavor of the food. It's making the food taste better. And that's something I really like about Beaujolais, is that it's very food friendly. If you go to a bistro in Paris, when you're allowed to, you see a lot of Beaujolais on the menu. It's because it's very complementary to the food. It makes the food taste better. And we are soon going to have the holidays with Thanksgiving and Christmas and all the holidays. And that's perfect. Actually, Beaujolais Nouveau is perfect for the holiday season. For example, with the turkey, if you do a cranberry sauce, we have a lot of these berry notes in the Beaujolais Nouveau. Drink it chilled. You want to have the Nouveau slightly chilled, and that will go very well with the food. Odile, do you want me to start talking about the wine real quick?
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
I actually I learned a lot because I didn't know that the Beaujolais Nouveau could actually withstand some chilling,
Yes.
and it's new to me today, and it's wonderful to learn about.
Mm. So what I'm so Beaujolais Nouveau, basically Beaujolais is where it's coming from, and Nouveau it's how we make it. So basically, it's the first wine of the harvest. If you like cooking, and you're talking about Kugelhopf, if you like cooking, it's like when you're baking a cookie. Sometimes you eat the dough before you bake the cookie. The dough, that would be Beaujolais Nouveau. That gives you a first taste of what the cookie is going to taste like. So that's exactly what it is. It's just a wine that we harvested in August, we made right away, and we bottled after 2 months. And here on the third Thursday of November, we're drinking it. It's a wine of celebration. It's not a pretentious wine. It's a wine of pleasure, of sharing, uh, of thirst, and that will give you a good indication of what the vintage will be without the weight. It's a good cause for celebration and and drinking on a weekday too. Uh, so this Beaujolais Nouveau, I have a glass. I pour myself a glass. I chilled it. I put it in the fridge. I serve it chilled. That's how I like it. That's how we would drink it in Beaujolais. And it's easier to let. If you think it's too chilled for you, it's easier to warm up. You just have to wait. If it's hard to make it cooler when it's in your glass. So I always recommend for the reds, and in general, the room temperature at which you're living is always much higher than the recommended wine temperature. So I always give a little chill on my reds, and if it's too chilled, I just wait. So this Beaujolais Nouveau, you'll find some nice red and blackberries aroma, like little fruits, strawberry, cherry, a little of blueberry note as well, and almost a touch of candy. You can see when it's in your glass, you can see it's a young wine because it has a purple rim. On the edges, it's purple. That's a sign of youth. So that Beaujolais Nouveau, just drink it easily. One glass calls for another. It's very easy drinking. Then the second wine that we're going to taste is Beaujolais Village. Beaujolais Village. So now we're not doing a nouveau, so it's not a young baby wine. It's a wine that has made. We made the wine, what we call the fermentation, lasted for a longer time. We let it, the skins I was talking about, we let it ferment and macerate for a much longer time. And this Beaujolais Village, the flower label, I don't know if you can show it, Odile, but Beaujolais Village is something that you can drink year long, and doesn't have to be drunk within the first few months after the release. So Beaujolais Village is really my everyday go-to wine. And that's the one, I don't know how much it sells for at Haskell's, but it's very reasonable. It's reasonable for a wine that's, I think the 2019 you're tasting is 91 points James Suckling. And usually points, wine that are over 90 points don't sell for the price it's sold at. So great value, fantastic wine. You'll find it's much more structured. You have these nice dark fruit, bramble, blackberry flavors. It's structured, has good tannins, good acidity as well. Perfect for every day. So let's say Beaujolais Nouveau, you drink it for the holidays. Beaujolais Village, you're going to drink it Monday to Friday. And on the weekend, you want to have something a little nicer, a little more complex. You're going to have a cru Beaujolais. And that's Morgon. That's the last one we're tasting. Morgon is a cru, so that means it comes from a place very special that makes more sophisticated wines. And this Morgon can age for many years. You see, it's 4 years. So the one you're tasting is 2016 to 2020. It's actually fun because it's like your presidential election. We harvested in the fall of 2016, and we're drinking it now in the fall of 2020. So that wine here in Morgon, you'll find some cherry flavors, some dark cherry. You'll see it's a bit deeper. It's a bit more. It's much more complex, much more structured. It has more tannins. But here, what I love is that it has a little age. So we're going to lose a little bit of that fruitiness, and we're going to find much more complex, more austere, more secondaries aromas, something that comes from aging. And that can compare to a Pinot Noir. Remember, we were very close to Burgundy. So Beaujolais Nouveau, yeah, I see at Haskell is what, $12.99 is incredible. And by the way, I really wanted to say a few words about Haskell's because we've been partnering with them for many, many years. It's a fantastic company. I'm always so happy when I go visit them. They have an incredible selection. And I mean, sometimes I go there to find wines I cannot find in France. I cannot find in France. I bring it back from Haskell. They don't know. They didn't know I would say that, but it's true that sometimes I brought some bottles to George Duboeuf to taste because we couldn't find it in France. And I bought them at Haskell. So they do a great job and they know how to talk about the wines. And so the Morgon, if you find the 2016, you don't have to make it. You don't have to age it. It's already aged for you, and it's absolutely delicious. So maybe with the Morgon, drink it on the weekend. Have, for example, a duck breast, pan-seared duck breast with a cherry gastrique, or you can have salmon, for example, if you like fish, or mushroom risotto, like portobello mushroom risotto, something a little meatier would go perfectly well with the Morgon. And this one, you don't chill it, you let it breathe, and you drink it in a bigger glass if you can. So three very different wines, but all delicious.